My name is Jordan. I'm 25 now, but the scars from when I was just 10 years old never fully healed, especially the ones you can't see. It was a rainy Tuesday night in the middle of October, the kind where the sky cries for you, and you don't know whether to cry with it or just disappear into the cold. I was sitting in the back seat of my mom's old green station wagon, hugging my backpack like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I didn't know where we were going, only that my mom had said, "We need to make a quick stop." I remember the way she kept checking the rearview mirror, not like she was watching traffic, but like she was watching me. Her eyes were different that night. Not mad, not sad, just gone. Like she'd already made peace with something I hadn't even seen coming. We pulled up to this dull gray building with a flickering porch light and a crooked wooden sign that said Children's Haven Shelter. I still remember the sound the rain made as it hit the hood of the car. It felt like the world was trying to warn me. But I was just a kid. What did I know? "Wait here," she said. Her voice was flat, cold. I didn't question her. I never did. She walked into the building like she was returning a library book. A few minutes later, she came back out with a tall woman in a red raincoat who smiled at me like she was meeting a lost puppy. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe my mom was volunteering here or dropping off clothes or something. But then she opened my door and said, "Come on, sweetie. We're just gonna talk to Miss Carol for a bit." I stepped out, clutching my backpack. I didn't even have a jacket. The rain soaked my hair instantly. I remember the exact way my mom's hand felt when she placed it on my shoulder for the last time. Inside the shelter, it smelled like microwave food and old carpet. There were drawings on the walls, made by kids who had probably been there way too long. Miss Carol took me to a small room with a sofa and a box of used toys. She asked me my name, my birthday, if I was hungry. I answered like a robot, too confused to ask questions of my own. Then she left the room, and my mom was gone. Vanished. I ran out into the hallway, panic setting in like a fever. "Where's my mom?" I asked. "Where did she go?" Miss Carol's face shifted. Her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. "She left, honey. She said you ran away." But then she changed her story. She said she couldn't take care of you. I didn't believe it. Not at first. I screamed. I cried. I kicked the wall until my foot went numb. They tried to calm me down, but nothing made sense. My mom had promised she'd always be there. Just me and her. She used to say, "Team Jordan." That was our thing. Except, apparently, it wasn't. I waited by the window for days, convinced she'd come back. I told everyone she'd just gone to get gas or got lost or had an emergency. I even made up stories about her calling the shelter and saying she missed me. But no one believed it, not even me. Eventually, I stopped talking. I stopped hoping. I just became another kid in the system. They enrolled me in a new school, gave me a new toothbrush, and a donated pair of sneakers 2 sizes too big. I bounced from foster home to foster home like a piece of unwanted furniture. Some homes were kind, others were barely tolerable. But none of them were mine. I held on to the only thing I had left, a crumpled picture of me and my mom at the county fair when I was 8. She was smiling in it. Genuinely smiling. Her arm around me like I was the only thing that mattered. I kept that photo under my pillow, even when I changed beds 5 times in 1 year. And then came the real kicker. 3 months after I was abandoned, a social worker told me the police had spoken to my mom. She told them I ran away. That she had no idea where I was. No mention of the shelter. No mention of dropping me off. Just pure calculated lies. Why? That question haunted me for the next 15 years. Not how she left me, but why? Why abandon your child at 10 years old? Why lie about it? Why vanish from my life like I never even existed? There was no note. No explanation. Just silence. I got older. The system chewed me up like it did so many others. By the time I was 17, I had learned to smile when I was supposed to, say thank you even when I didn't mean it, and never expect anyone to stick around. I aged out of foster care the moment I turned 18. I had no college prospects, no family, no support system. Just a part-time job at a gas station and a tiny studio apartment with no heat in the winter. I tried not to think about her. I tried to bury the rage, the sadness, the questions. But every birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw a mom holding her child's hand, I felt the wound reopen. Some kids grow up dreaming of being astronauts or athletes. I grew up dreaming of answers. But I never expected the truth to come the way it did 15 years later, wrapped in a lie so deep it would unravel everything I thought I knew about my past. It exposed a secret that would break my heart all over again. By the time I turned 25, I'd learned how to survive. I had a steady job at a small auto repair shop in Ohio, a decent apartment, and a few coworkers who didn't ask too many questions. I didn't have friends, at least not the kind who knew my story. I was good at keeping people at a distance. If life had taught me anything, it was that closeness led to abandonment. I kept my head down, worked 6 days a week, and tried not to dwell on what could have been. But sometimes, late at night, I'd pull out that same faded picture of me and my mom from when I was 8. Her smile in that photo haunted me. How could someone look so full of love, then throw their own child away like garbage? One evening, after closing up the shop, I stopped by the local grocery store for some frozen pizza and orange juice. It was just another boring Tuesday, until I heard someone say my name, my full name. Jordan Ellis? I turned around, confused. A woman I'd never seen before stood near the entrance of the store. She looked to be in her early 40s, well-dressed, hair tied up in a neat bun. Her eyes were green. My mom had green eyes too, but this woman wasn't her. Still, something about her seemed familiar, unsettlingly so. Yeah? I said cautiously. She took a step forward, her eyes filling with something I didn't expect, sympathy. My name's Lynn. I think we're related. I almost laughed. That's not possible. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I've been trying to find you for months. I'm your aunt. Your mom's older sister. My stomach dropped. I didn't know my mom had a sister. She never mentioned any family. Ever. I know this is a shock, Leanne said gently. I didn't know about you until recently. I swear. But when I found out, I couldn't ignore it. I needed to find you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to walk away. I had done just fine without family for 15 years. But another part, the part that still wondered why my mom abandoned me, needed answers. So I nodded toward the parking lot. Let's talk. We sat in her car, the envelope still resting on the dashboard. She explained that she and my mom, Rebecca, had been estranged for years. Something about money and a falling out after their parents passed away. Leanne moved to Chicago. Rebecca stayed behind. I didn't know she had a child, Leanne said. When our mother died, she left behind a sizable inheritance. But Rebecca told everyone she didn't have any children. That she was alone. I blinked. Wait, inheritance? Leanne nodded. Our parents, your grandparents, owned several rental properties. When they passed, everything went to Rebecca. I assumed she would split it with me eventually, but she didn't. And then she vanished. Changed her number. Cut off all ties. Why are you telling me this now? She looked me dead in the eye. Because 2 months ago, I ran into an old friend of your mom's in Dallas. She told me your mom had a son once, but claimed he ran away when he was 10. That he probably got lost in the system. That was you, wasn't it? I felt like the air had been sucked out of the car. I didn't run away, I whispered. She left me. At a shelter. Just dumped me like a stray dog. Lynn closed her eyes, pained. I believe you. And I think you deserve to know the truth. She handed me the envelope. Inside were copies of legal documents, property deeds, a will, bank records. It was all in my mother's name. She'd inherited nearly $2 million in property and savings by the time I was 8. And yet, 2 years later, she abandoned me at a shelter, lied to the police, and told everyone I'd disappeared. I don't understand, I said, barely breathing. Why would she do that? Why tell people I ran away? Leanne hesitated. Because, she said slowly, if you were declared missing, or presumed dead, she wouldn't have to share anything with you. The words hit like a punch to the chest. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I just sat there, shaking. The pieces started to click together. All those nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough, why she didn't want me. And now, I had my answer. Money. I was an obstacle, a threat to her newfound wealth. And she got rid of me like I was nothing. Leanne placed a hand on my shoulder. I know this is hard to hear, but you deserve to know the truth. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to understand what really happened. I stared at the papers. There was a record of a trust fund my grandmother had created for Rebecca's descendants. But after I ran away, Rebecca filed to dissolve the trust, claiming there were no living descendants. She had erased me, and no one questioned it. Not the bank, not the court, not even Leanne, because she didn't know I existed. My mom had painted a world where she was alone, and everyone believed her. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment with the documents spread out on the kitchen table, staring at the black and white proof that I had been discarded for money. I thought about the shelter, the families I lived with, the birthdays I spent alone, the nights I considered ending it all because I felt so unwanted. All because my mom wanted a bigger bank account. I'd dreamed of answers my whole life, but I never imagined they'd come with this much pain. I didn't know what I would do next. But I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to get away with it. I didn't go to work the next day. I couldn't. I spent the entire morning pacing my tiny apartment, Leanne's envelope still sitting on the table like a bomb that had already gone off. Every time I looked at it, my heart twisted in a different direction: pain, anger, confusion, disbelief. But mostly, I felt rage. She'd left me, lied about me, taken the money and built a life without me. And now she was out there, probably living comfortably, while I had spent the last 15 years barely surviving. I didn't know what I wanted at first. Revenge? Closure? Maybe just to see her face when I told her I knew everything. But the more I thought about it, the more obsessed I became with one idea: confrontation. I needed to look her in the eye. So I started digging. Leanne gave me a few leads, old addresses, a former job, some Facebook posts that hadn't been updated in years. For a while, it seemed like Rebecca Ellis had fallen off the grid. No social media, no phone listings, no public records that matched her last known address. But I'd been alone long enough to learn how to find things people didn't want found. I took a week off from work and drove from Ohio to Texas. I went city to city, knocking on doors, asking questions, following paper trails. Half the people slammed the door in my face. Others hadn't seen her in years. But eventually, someone remembered her name, an older woman who worked at a diner in Fort Worth. Rebecca Ellis? She asked, stirring a pot of coffee. Yeah. She lives out near Denton now. Works at a real estate office, I think. Big house. Always keeps to herself. I thanked her and left a big tip. It took another 2 days to narrow down her location. But when I pulled up to her house, a sleek, modern 2-story home in a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood, I froze. This was it. This was where she lived while I rotted in foster care. This was where she spent holidays while I stared at the walls of group homes. This was where she built a whole life, with clean white siding, flower beds, and a silver Lexus in the driveway. Like nothing had ever happened. I parked down the street and waited. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe for her to look different, older, sadder, weighed down by guilt. But when she stepped out onto the porch that afternoon, talking cheerfully on the phone with a glass of wine in her hand, she looked like she didn't have a single regret in the world. My breath caught in my throat. She looked exactly the same. The same green eyes. The same proud posture. Even the same haircut she had when I was a kid. But she didn't look for me. She never looked for me. And something about that made the fire in my chest rage even hotter. I waited until the next morning. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted one more night to calm down. But when I finally got out of the car and walked up to the house, my hands were shaking. She opened the door in a silk robe and barely glanced at me. Yes? She asked, holding her phone like she was ready to end the conversation before it began. I stood there, frozen. Hi, I said. I think you know who I am. She frowned. I'm sorry? I stepped closer. It's me, Jordan. There was a pause. A long, quiet moment where I thought maybe she would fall to her knees in shock. Maybe cry. Maybe even say my name out loud like she missed me all these years. But instead, she just blinked. I'm sorry, she said. I don't know who you are. My chest went hollow. It's Jordan, Mom, I said louder. Your son. The one you left at a shelter when I was 10. The one you told the police ran away. The one you've pretended never existed for 15 years. Her eyes went wide for a split second, a flicker of something, and then, just like that, it vanished. She smiled. A fake, tight-lipped smile that made my skin crawl. I think you must be mistaken, she said, stepping back. I don't have a son. Now, please leave before I call the police. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're really gonna stand there, I said, my voice trembling, and pretend like I'm not your kid? After everything you did to me? After you stole an inheritance meant for both of us and threw me away like garbage? I don't know what you're talking about, she said. And I want you off my property. She went to shut the door, but I blocked it with my hand. I have proof, I said. I know about the trust. I know about Grandma and Grandpa. I know what you did. Leanne found me. She told me everything. Her expression finally cracked. Her eyes narrowed, and her jaw tightened. The mask dropped just for a second. Of course she did, she muttered. That woman always stuck her nose where it didn't belong. So it's true? I asked. You left me so you could keep the money? She stared at me for a long time. And then, without apology, without hesitation, she said, You were a complication, Jordan. You were always a complication. I did what I had to do. You don't get to judge me for that. I took a step back, stunned. You were my mother, I whispered. You were supposed to protect me. I gave you 10 years, she said coldly. And they were hard years. I was broke, alone, working double shifts just to feed you. Then suddenly, I had a way out. A new life. And I took it. She looked at me like I was the villain in her story. I'm not sorry, she said. Not for leaving. Not for lying. I survived. That's all that mattered. My fists clenched at my sides. Every fiber of my body wanted to scream, to tear her perfect little house to pieces. But instead, I reached into my backpack and pulled out a folder, copies of the inheritance documents, the trust fund, the false statements she made to the court. I handed it to her. You're going to pay for what you did, I said. Legally. Financially. You don't get to erase me. You don't get to live in comfort while I suffered for 15 years. That ends now. She didn't say anything. She just stared at the folder in her hands like it was poison. Then, without a word, she shut the door in my face. I stood on that porch for a full minute, staring at the wood grain. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I walked back to my car and started the engine. I didn't know what would happen next, whether she'd lawyer up or beg for forgiveness. But either way, she knew I wasn't gone. And she could never pretend I didn't exist again. I drove away from that house with my hands gripping the wheel so tight I thought the leather would tear. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove, through Denton, through Dallas, past gas stations and grocery stores and families walking their dogs like the world hadn't just shifted under my feet. She remembered me. She recognized me the moment I said my name. She knew exactly who I was. And she lied anyway. I parked outside an empty strip mall and just sat there for hours, staring at the night sky through the windshield, trying to calm my heart. My whole life I had imagined this moment, the reunion, the confrontation, the truth finally coming out. But nothing prepared me for the sheer emptiness I felt walking away from that door. I thought maybe she'd be sorry. Or that, at the very least, she'd admit it. But she didn't even flinch. She looked me in the face, her own son, and said she had no regrets. That I was a complication. A burden. That she chose money over me and didn't lose a wink of sleep about it. And that's when something in me snapped. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not this time. The next morning, I met with a local attorney in Dallas who specialized in family trust and inheritance fraud. I laid out everything, the documents Leanne gave me, the false statements my mother had made, even copies of police records showing she claimed I had run away. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. "This is a lot," he said, flipping through the pages. "But it's also compelling. If we can prove she willfully hid your existence to claim full access to the trust, and if we can establish your identity and relationship to the original grantors, you might have a real case here." "Will she go to jail?" He hesitated. "That's harder. Fraud's tough to prosecute after so many years. But we could sue for damages. And depending on the trust language, you might be entitled to a portion of the estate, or even control over it, if she breached the terms." For the first time in forever, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not revenge. Not violence. Just power. The kind that comes from finally being seen. Heard. Validated. He agreed to take the case on contingency. Said he wanted justice as much as I did. I left the office with a folder full of forms, a signed agreement, and a fire burning in my chest. But my mom must have felt the shift in the air, because the next day, I got a letter. No return address. No note inside. Just a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to me. No explanation. No apology. Just hush money. I almost laughed. This was her play? After 15 years of silence and betrayal, she thought money would keep me quiet? I didn't cash the check. I handed it straight to my lawyer, who added it to our case file. But the message was clear. She was scared. She knew what was coming. I started keeping records of everything. Every message. Every document. I spoke to Leanne again and asked her to testify. She agreed, even though I could tell it shook her. She hadn't talked to Rebecca in over a decade and didn't want to reopen old wounds. But she looked me in the eyes and said, "You were robbed of a childhood. If I can help you get even a piece of that back, I will." And then the retaliation started. Small at first. A call from a private investigator asking weird questions about my job. A complaint filed against me at the auto shop that almost got me fired. An anonymous email claiming I was lying about being Rebecca's son for attention and money. It was her. I knew it was her. She was trying to ruin my credibility before I could even step into a courtroom. But I wasn't that helpless little boy anymore. I wasn't curled up in a shelter bed, wondering why I wasn't enough. I was a grown man with the truth on my side, and I wasn't going down without a fight. One night, while scrolling through old internet archives, I found something that made my heart stop. A community blog post from 2009, just a few months after I was abandoned, talking about how Rebecca Ellis had overcome personal tragedy and recently lost her child. She told people I died, I whispered, scrolling through the comments. Sympathy poured in from her neighbors and church friends. One woman even mentioned how brave she was for enduring such a loss and still showing up to volunteer at the food drive. She didn't just lie to the court. She lied to everyone. She played the grieving mother, milked sympathy and maybe even donations, while I was crying myself to sleep in a bunk bed shared with 6 other foster kids. And the worst part? They believed her. Because who would question a woman claiming her child ran away and never came back? It made me sick. But it also gave me fuel. My attorney added the blog post to the evidence pile. He said it was gold, proof of intent, proof of deception, proof of emotional manipulation for personal gain. She weaponized your disappearance, he said. That's powerful in court. The case moved forward. We filed a civil suit for fraud, inheritance misappropriation, and emotional damages. Rebecca tried to ignore it at first. Then she sent her own lawyer, a smug, overpaid man with slicked back hair who called the lawsuit a pathetic money grab. I showed him the picture from when I was 8, the one I carried for years, and said, "That's me. That's her. That's the family she pretended didn't exist." He didn't say much after that. Depositions were scheduled. Witnesses were called. Leanne gave a powerful statement about how Rebecca had cut off all contact after receiving the inheritance, and how she never told a soul she had a son. I was finally being seen. Finally being heard. Finally getting the story out there that I'd been forced to bury for so long. And then, something I never expected happened. A woman reached out to me on Facebook. Her name was Allison. She said she used to be Rebecca's neighbor. They lived 2 houses down during the missing child years. And she had something she thought I should see. We met at a coffee shop near Denton. She looked nervous but kind. "I kept a journal," she said. "During that time, Rebecca and I weren't close, but I remember things. Strange things." She handed me a worn notebook. In it were pages from 15 years ago, notes about Rebecca suddenly looking happier, buying new furniture, and saying she'd found peace after letting go of something toxic. She was talking about me. There were also receipts. Literally. Copies of invoices from when Rebecca hired a moving company and changed homes 2 weeks after dropping me off at the shelter. It was all there. Proof that she never looked for me. Proof that she'd planned the whole thing. Proof that she had no intention of coming back. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about money. It was about erasure. She wanted a clean slate. A new life. One where I didn't exist. But I did exist. And I wasn't going away. The courtroom was quiet. I could hear the sound of my own breath, the soft rustle of papers, and the distant hum of the air conditioning. After all the chaos, the traveling, the digging, the lawyers, the threats, we were finally here. My mother, Rebecca Ellis, sat just 20 feet away from me, but it felt like another world. She wore a crisp gray blazer, hair pulled back like she was some businesswoman instead of the woman who'd thrown away her child. Her expression was unreadable, but I didn't need to guess what she was thinking. She thought she was still in control. She thought she'd win. She thought I was still the scared little boy she left behind in a shelter lobby with nothing but a backpack and a confused look on his face. But I wasn't. I was a man who had survived. A man who had built a life out of broken pieces. A man who remembered everything, and finally had the chance to speak. When I took the stand, my hands trembled at first. Not because I was afraid of her, but because, for the first time in my life, people were listening. "I was 10 years old," I began, staring down at the wooden table in front of me. "I thought my mom was taking me out for ice cream or to visit someone. I didn't even bring a jacket. She said we were making a quick stop. But she didn't come back." I looked directly at her. She never came back. There was a quiet gasp in the courtroom. Someone shifted in their seat. My lawyer nodded at me to keep going. For days, I waited. I told the shelter worker she must have gotten lost, or her phone had died, or something had happened. But nothing happened. She left me there because she didn't want me anymore. And not only did she leave, she lied. She told the police I ran away. She told the courts I didn't exist. She told her entire community that I was gone. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. She even told people I died. While I was being shuffled between foster homes, sleeping in strangers' bedrooms, and eating off paper plates, she was out there collecting inheritance money, buying furniture, and telling everyone she was a grieving mother. I held up the photo I'd carried for 15 years, the one of us at the fair, me on her shoulders, both of us laughing. She was my world, and I was disposable to her. The room was completely still. I stepped down from the stand and sat back beside my attorney. And as the judge called the next witness, I saw something I hadn't seen before in Rebecca's eyes. Not guilt, not sadness, but fear. She was losing. The rest of the trial felt like a blur. There were documents, expert witnesses, former neighbors, social workers. Leanne's testimony was particularly damning. She talked about how their parents had left a trust specifically for Rebecca's future children, and how that trust was emptied within 2 years of my disappearance. She told us Jordan ran away, Leanne said clearly. But she never looked for him. She moved towns, changed her number, pretended he didn't exist. And she never told a soul he was in a shelter. Then Allison, the neighbor, brought her journal entries and those receipts. The courtroom gasped when she read one particular line out loud. Rebecca says the house feels lighter now. She says she finally did something for herself. That something was abandoning me. The final blow came when my attorney laid out the timeline of events, the inheritance dates, the forged affidavits, the timeline of her lies. There were too many coincidences. Too many deliberate moves. Too much deception. When it came time for the verdict, I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't asking for millions. I wasn't trying to ruin her life the way she had ruined mine. I just wanted it on record that I existed. That I mattered. That I was her son. And she chose greed over me. The judge ruled in my favor. She didn't just lose the case. She was ordered to pay restitution for inheritance fraud, emotional damages, and was barred from ever touching what remained of the trust again. The remaining assets were frozen, and a portion would go to me, along with a formal court statement that acknowledged me as the legal descendant of my grandparents. It was validation. It was truth. It was closure. And yet, as I walked out of that courtroom, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because no amount of money could give me back what I lost. The birthdays. The hugs. The stability. The simple act of having someone who was supposed to stay. For a few weeks after the trial, I didn't do much. I stayed in my apartment, watched old movies, ignored calls from reporters and local journalists who had caught wind of the case. They wanted interviews. A story. A headline. But I wasn't ready to turn my pain into content. I needed to breathe. Eventually, Leanne visited again. She brought me a box of old family photos, pictures of my grandparents, old holidays, even some of my mom when she was a teenager. I didn't know what to do with them at first. I thought you should have them, she said. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know, I said quietly. Thank you. In that moment, I realized something. I didn't need Rebecca's apology. I didn't need her to change. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But I could choose what I did next. I could choose healing. One day, I drove back to the shelter where it all started. I sat in the parking lot for a long time just watching the door. Kids were coming in and out. One boy looked about 10, skinny, scared, just like I had been. And something inside me shifted. That night, I started drafting a letter. Not to my mom. Not to the judge. To the kids who were still there. To the ones who got left behind. I shared my story. My truth. My pain. And I told them, you are not invisible. You are not worthless. And your future doesn't have to be defined by who walked away. That letter turned into a blog. The blog turned into a project. The project turned into a support network for foster kids and aged-out teens who needed help, resources, guidance, or just someone to say, I see you. The pain didn't vanish. It never does. But it transformed. And that's the part of the story I want people to remember. Not just the betrayal, not just the courtroom, not just the lies, but the fact that I survived it. That I built something from it. Because I may have been abandoned, but I was never broken. And the world finally knows the truth.